Hey everyone, welcome back to another very exciting Adobe Live. I am your host, Jesús Ramirez. How are you guys doing today? I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat already. Hey Carol, Greg, Sean, Steve, John, Arian, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you're all doing well in this Monday morning for me. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's 7:30 a.m. Let me know where you're watching from. I hope that you're all doing well. Today we're going to be working with Adobe Dimension, and we're going to create some really cool text effects in Adobe Dimension. By the way, this is a getting started stream, so if you're new to Adobe Dimension, no worries. We're going to start from the very beginning so that you can understand how the app works and all the different tools and features so that you can create some awesome 3D text effects. All right, so don't worry if you're brand new to Adobe Dimension. We're going to take it easy. We're going to go slow. And I'm going to provide you information in small digestible chunks so you can follow along. Let me take a look at the chat. Tim wrote, oh, hey, nice living room, Jesus. Yeah, this is my living room. You guys like it? No, actually, this was made in Adobe Dimension. So I'm going to talk about the project that I created with Dimension. Obviously, we're not going to get into complex items like the room behind me, but everything that I'm going to teach, there are things that are going to build up so that you can create something as complex as the room behind me. Wake me up with knowledge, says Clever. Hey, Jorge, how are you? Steve, how's it going? Sean looks like he's sitting on the floor with this perspective. Yeah, it kind of looks like I am sitting on the floor. I guess I would need to move it down a little bit. You're right about that. Cool. So I hope that you're all doing well, and let me just switch over to my screen so that we can check out just one page. So give me 1 second here. Let me come over onto my laptop screen. And what you should be seeing now is my Behance page. You can find me at JR from PTC on Behance. And I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to click on this contemporary living space 3D scene. This scene was created in Adobe Dimension. So this is the living room that was just behind me a moment ago. You can see that here with a little more detail if you like. All the 3D objects are Adobe stock assets, and the textures were created using either Adobe stock materials or custom-made materials inside of Photoshop. And you can scroll down and you can see this little cool animation of what the scene looks inside of Dimension. Here is the same perspective without any materials, and there's different angles of the room, and there's a lot of hidden Easter eggs in here. Let me see if you guys can find them all. I'll point maybe just a couple out to you, but for example, here's a fun Easter egg right here, this little S at the bottom right. That is the IceFlow Studios logo. If you guys remember, our good friend Howard Pinsky, who is an evangelist for XD here at Adobe, used to run, I guess he still does in some ways, a YouTube channel called iFlow Studios, and that's his logo right there. And you might recognize some of the other logos in there. Also, I have books here that were all, basically I took the covers of all these books, they're all real books, and I took the covers, scanned them, and then, or I didn't even scan them, I literally took a photo with my phone, and then brought that inside of Dimension to create those books, and all those books are from friends of mine. You might recognize some of these books. I'll point one out. The one right here is by Bert Monroy, who's a good friend of mine now, and he is my Photoshop hero, and this is the very first book on Photoshop that I ever bought. So I put that in there. And again, you might find other Easter eggs. I'll point out another one that you might recognize. I think this is a good angle right here. The coffee cup right here. Anybody can guess whose logo that is? But yeah, the coffee cup right here, this red coffee cup, that is from a streamer who streams often. So let's see if you guys can guess who that streamer is. It looks like is that you? The audio is not clear. Audio having some issues. There is, but he is offline or backstage chat. Oh, cool. So it looks like we're still having some audio issues. Cool. Let me check it out. Let me see what's going on. Let me switch microphones and see if that helps. So give me 1 second. I'm going to switch microphones. All right. So. Can you guys hear me? Let me know if you guys can hear me, and if this audio is good, then I can continue with this audio. And I am checking Slack right now. But yeah, let me know if the audio that's on now works. And I just switched over my microphone, so let me know if that works. Okay, so the audio is the same. Okay. Give me one quick second and let me just refresh everything. I'll be right back, and sorry about that. Give me one quick second. Sorry about that, guys. Give me one moment. Hey everybody, I think I'm back. Let me know if the audio is a little better. I'm gonna refresh the chat just so that I can see what's going on live here with you guys. And in the chat, let me know if that's any better. Let me message my good friend Tim here. All right, guys, I'm looking at the chat now, so let me know if it's any better. Okay, says now the audio is good. Thank you, Ariane. So all right, cool. Awesome. Why don't we just keep going from where we left off? I'll quickly just say hello again and let you guys know thank you for being here. This is going to be an Adobe Dimension getting started stream. We're going to work with text effects. And what I was talking about when I realized that the audio wasn't working properly is that the room behind me, which was on the main screen here, this one behind me is an Adobe Dimension render room. All the assets in here were created using Adobe stock 3D models and Adobe stock materials, or in some cases I did a custom made material using Photoshop. We might do a little bit of that tomorrow, not today. Today we're going to focus on the basics. We're going to do small digestible chunks so that if you're a beginner, you can follow along. This is a getting started stream. Also, let me know in the chat where you're watching from. Like I was saying, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. It is a beautiful morning. I was having some audio issues, but no problem. We're all ready to go. So let me know where you're watching from. Before we even move on, since I already spent some time trying to fix the audio, let me quickly go over the schedule. So we're gonna start with me at 7:30 a.m. Pacific doing the getting started in Adobe Dimension. Right after me, we have the amazing Voodoo Val at 9 a.m. doing the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. So make sure that you stick around for her. Then we have Vector Art with Lacey Jordan. We have the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with Julia Masalska at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. Then at 12 Pacific, we have Kate doing an Adobe XD sharing and collaboration stream. At 2 p.m., we have the XD Daily Creative Challenge with Peter. And at 2:30, we have Andrew and Doc Reed doing the Design in the Dark stream, 2:30 a.m. Pacific. So it's a fun-filled day. Make sure that you stick around until the very end. Awesome. So I can see that you guys are already typing up where you're watching from. So I see that we have people watching from France, from New Zealand. Awesome. My good friend Colin Smith is from New Zealand. Colin Smith from Photoshop Cafe. We have people watching from France, India, Germany, Oklahoma City, Saudi Arabia. Awesome. And oh man, it looks like I missed a whole bunch of other people. We have Carol from South Florida. Hey there, Carol. Good to see you. You're always on. That's awesome. We have people from Brazil, India. Awesome. Thank you so much for watching. It's super cool seeing everybody all over the world tuning in for this challenge. Let me switch my screen up to my laptop share. And what I was talking about before I realized that the audio was not working properly is I was showing you guys on my behance.net page. So if you go into behance.net/JR from PTC, you'll see my Behance page, of course. And if you scroll down into the contemporary living room space 3D scene in Adobe Dimension, you'll see the high resolution version of the photo that I had behind me just a moment ago. And this is an animation of inside of the application so that you can see what the 3D space looks like. This is the same render that you saw without any materials or lights. And then you can see different views of that 3D scene. And there's a lot of hidden Easter eggs in here. Some of them you may recognize, other ones probably not. But for example, we have the S here from Howard Pinsky. He used to run a Photoshop channel called iSlow Studios. That was the old logo. I guess Howard still runs the channel. There's books from a lot of people that I admire. I actually own all these books, and what I did here is I took a photo of the book covers and then brought them into Dimension as materials. I did that in Photoshop. And this one in particular here, the white one, is a book by my good friend Bert Monroy, who is my Photoshop hero and the first Photoshop book that I ever bought. And also in this angle, I guess this angle here is probably one of the best ones. You can see a logo from a streamer that often streams here. Let me know in the chat who you think that is. But her logo, that's a clue, it's right here. So a bunch of cool stuff. And we have our friend Jake. Hey Jake, how's it going? Good to see you. Jake is in the chat. And yeah, we have the 1350 Distilling logo like right here. Yep. How's it going, Jake? Yeah, there's even a Design Ninja sticker. Oh, I didn't know Tony was on earlier. Awesome. Super, super cool. Colin is Kiwi. Well, Colin was born in Scotland, but he lived in New Zealand since he was like 2 or 3 years old. So yeah, he's technically from New Zealand. Awesome. Cool. Cool. All right, let's jump right into Dimension now. So let me just bring up Dimension. This is Adobe Dimension. This is an application to create renderings from 3D objects. It's designed for people who are not 3D artists, so it should be fairly easy to pick up if you're familiar with design applications. So you don't need any prior 3D experience to use Adobe Dimension. So the first step, for me at least, when I open up Adobe Dimension for the first time on a new installation of Adobe Dimension, I like to change the layout so it's a darker layout, much like the same layout that I use in Photoshop. So what I like to do is I like to go into Edit, Preferences, and go into the dark theme. So that's like usually the first thing that I do, and I'll do that with this installation of Dimension as well. And the first step is to create a new document. So this is our 3D scene. And again, this is a getting started session, so I'm going to go slow. I'm going to try to teach you guys all the basics, and then we'll move on working on a basic 3D text effect. Cool. Awesome. So the first step is just, I want to bring in a 3D object. So in Dimension, we work with 3D objects, and you can see that Dimension comes with all these different 3D objects for free. You can download more from Adobe Stock. Some are paid and some are free. If you click on this plus icon and select Adobe Stock, you can see the free collection. You can click on free collection and it will open up a new page, and you can see all the free 3D objects you can download. You can see the word free. See that? Free. All these are free from Adobe Stock. So you have more 3D elements that you can download for free, and you can download them and play around with them if you like. And those are 3D objects that are downloaded into the Creative Cloud, and then from the Creative Cloud you can work with them in Dimension. But Dimension has 3D models that are built in, and you can see those 3D models here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to select, I guess, this bottle. We'll work with the bottle. Actually, no, I need something that has some corners so that we can see how it rotates. So I'll select this other bottle. So we have this bottle here. So that's our 3D object. When you drag it into the canvas, you place it on the ground plane. That's that grid that you see on the bottom there. The ground plane catches reflections and it catches shadows. So it's very, very important. Also, you can select these tools here. You can see that the Move tool, or the Select tool rather, in Dimension brings up these overlays. Those overlays allow you to move, scale, and rotate the 3D object in the axes that you select. The little pointy corner tip on top, like these corner pointy tips, they allow you to move the 3D object. The cubes allow you to scale the 3D object, and the little circle allows you to rotate the 3D object. So I can move the 3D object in 3D space, as you can see here, and I can hold Shift and click on the cube and scale it uniformly. If I don't hold Shift, I can scale it just in that axis, as you see there. I'm going to press Control Z on Windows, Command Z on the Mac to undo. I can also rotate the 3D object. You can see how I'm just rotating it. So very, very simple. All you have to do is just click and drag on those icons, and then you can manipulate the object. Cool. Next, let's talk about the camera. I'm going to skip these tools for now because they deal with materials, and I'm going to talk about these 3 tools, and they are tools that help you with the camera. So earlier I was moving the object itself. So if you think about you looking at an object on a table, so for example, if my hand is a table and my phone is the object, I was rotating and moving and scaling the object. But the table, like where you're watching from, you were not moving. You were standing in the same spot and the phone was doing all the motion. With the camera, now that's your perspective. So the phone, or in this case the bottle, would stay still, but we're going to move around it so we can look at it from a different direction. So that's the camera. And that's what these tools control. So I can click and I can just select that orbit tool, and I can orbit around in 3D space. The object is not moving, only I'm moving. Then we have the pan tool, which allows me to pan. It's almost like in some ways it's like the hand tool in Photoshop where you can just click and drag it, it moves it around. But in this case, it actually affects the final output. And then we have the dolly tool, which allows us to zoom in and out of the 3D object, like so. Cool. So that is the basic tools that you're going to use in Dimension. You're going to use the tools to move, rotate, or scale the object, or the tools to move around the object in 3D space. So that's the difference. Object moving or we're moving. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. Cool. Awesome. And I just saw a comment by Carol. Yes, Carol, there's a very important thing that I'll mention now. I was going to mention it later, but since you're mentioning, you brought it up, I'll mention that now. So if you're moving your 3D object and you move it up, notice that the object is no longer sitting on the 3D plane. So then there's a gap between the object and the shadow. And depending on the project that you're working on, you may not want that. You may actually want the bottle sitting on that 3D plane. So what you need to do is here on the right hand side we have an actions panel, and one of the actions is this action here, the one with the arrow pointing down. If you hover over it, you'll see the label that reads move to ground plane or move to ground. If you click on it, it just brings that 3D object back down and sits it on the ground plane. So that's very important to do, and that's a habit that you may want to get into as you're moving things around and scaling them and making them bigger. You may inadvertently move it up high or even low. For example, if I could bring this down like so, and notice now that my 3D object is being cut by the ground plane. So that's also not good. So if I click on this button, it just moves it back up onto the ground plane and it just sits on there. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I just noticed a whole bunch of technical issues today. I just noticed the flickering on the screen myself when I'm viewing the replay there. But anyway, let me now talk about materials. So we just talked about 3D objects. 3D objects are obviously the elements, like the physical elements that we're going to see on screen that we're going to work with and how we can manipulate them. You saw me using the scale tools to move them and pull them around. If I click on this icon, you can see that I can go right into the materials, or I can just scroll all the way down and find the materials. And the materials they're what gives the 3D object its look. So for example, like a classic one that's super cool is the metal one. I can click and drag it into the bottle, and now I have a metal look on my bottle. But I don't have to do metal. I can do this walnut wood material, click and drag it, and it applies it onto my 3D object. Now, the other tools that I didn't talk about earlier deal with the 3D object, or I'm sorry, with the materials themselves. First of all, we have the magic wand tool. The magic wand allows us to select a part of the 3D object. For example, the lid here, maybe we'll select this part here. And maybe I don't want that seal to have the same material. So I just made a selection around that piece of geometry, and I can click and drag a different material onto that piece of geometry so that that little seal is just plastic. It's not wood like the rest of it. And I can use my magic wand tools to select different things. Also, when you are working with these tools, you have different options. If you double click, you can select the different selection modes like add to selection or subtract to selection, and you can increase the size that the magic wand tool, you can increase the size of the selection that a magic wand tool makes, and you can adjust that like so. And actually all the tools, or most of the tools I should say, if you double click on it, it'll give you different options. For example, the move tool allows you to do group select if you wanted to, align to scene, and all these other different settings. But generally speaking, I like to just stick with the basic select an object and then click and drag on the points. Cool. Let me see if there's any other question. Let's see. It looks like, it looks like I forgot to put the music back on when I came back on. If you guys want music, I can put the music on. Let me enable that. Actually, now I'm afraid of like messing with the audio in case the music was causing the problem. So you know what? I'm being superstitious right now, so I'm just gonna leave the music because I'm not sure what the audio problem was. So if it was the music, then I don't want to cause the issue again. But anyway, so this is how materials work. You just click and drag them into the 3D object. Another very important thing to note is that when you're working with materials, you can select your 3D object, and if you go into the 3D scene here on the right hand side into the scene panel, you can see the different pieces of geometry, and you can also select them from here. See, I'm selecting the lid, the bottle, the safety ring. So if I select the lid, I can select that from here. So I don't need the quick selection tool or the magic wand tool. If not all 3D models are designed like this, where they just separate all the different pieces, which is why you need the magic wand tool. But this one in particular does separate the pieces out. So for example, if I select the lid, I can now apply a different material to the lid. And the cool thing about this is that when you select a material, for example, the safety ring here, you can make adjustments. So if I select the bottle here, I can make adjustments to my walnut wood, and I can scroll down and you can see this repeat pattern. It says 1x. Well, what does that mean? Well, check this out. If I click and drag this thing, actually, I'll just type in a number. I'll type in like 3, for example. You can see how the pattern in the material changes. So I'm making it smaller. So the higher the number is, the more the pattern repeats, and it's smaller. And the lower the number, the less the pattern repeats and the bigger it is. So you can make an adjustment in here, like for example, set it to 5, so you can scale the pattern in the material accordingly so that it matches your 3D scene. In this case, for example, if we had set it to maybe 0.5, that might be too big, but if we set it to 5, then that looks a little bit better. And to be frank with you, that might still be a little too big, so I'll try maybe 7. And yeah, I think I like that better. So you have all these different properties here that you can adjust in the properties panel. And all the materials are going to have different properties. Some materials are going to have more properties than others. So make sure that you always go into the properties and see what type of properties the particular material that you have is going to display on there. So for example, let me try a different one. Let's see if this one has different properties. So I'm just going to click and drag it over, and this one does have a lot more properties. See that? See, this one has a pattern selection, hexagon. I can maybe do square, or I could do circle, tile offset, so they have just a whole bunch of different options that you can adjust, and they're super customizable. So it's totally up to you. It all depends on the design that you're going for. This one also has a ceramic color, so maybe I can change this one to red so that it matches the lid. I could also change the repeat. So again, if I set it to 5, it's going to make those circles much smaller. If I set it to 0.5, it's going to make them much larger. So it all depends on what you're doing. So make sure that you always go into the properties panel and check out the different properties for each individual material. Like I said, some of them have a lot of properties and others don't have that many. Maybe just like the color and the repeat and the offset and not much more. So make sure you check them out. Cool. Let me see. Cool. Let me see if there's any questions. Awesome. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about lights. So we have our lights here, and I'm just going to select lights. And these are lights that come built in with Dimension, and you can, just like the materials, you can click and drag them into the scene. So for example, I have these studio lights that are going to give that studio light effect to this 3D model. I think it'll be most obvious when I drag one of these crazy ones, like for example this one with the studio color stage lights. You can see how the lights affect the 3D scene. In a lot of cases, I don't tend to use the lights if I'm compositing my 3D model into a photo, because I can use the photo as the light. Let me show you what I mean by that. I can select this images tab, and from here I can select an image. The classic image that you probably have seen in a lot of advertising is like the city backdrop. So I'm going to drag my city backdrop into there. Dimension is going to tell me, hey, do you want to match the image to your scene or the scene to your image to be more accurate? And you can press OK. And I'm going to click on the match image button. And basically I can resize the image to canvas. I can create lights, which is what I was talking about. I want to create lights to match so that the 3D scene matches the image. And I can also match the camera perspective so that it seems like the 3D object is sitting on the ground plane of the background, in this case of the ground here. So if I press OK, Dimension is going to match all those. And notice now how Dimension is also reflecting the buildings onto the bottle. And if it's not clear to see, what I'll do is I'll just go back and select my bottle here and go into the materials. I'm going to click on the materials tab, and I'm going to click and drag the metal over and drop it in there. And you can see now with a metal material that the 3D scene is reflected on that material. And look at the shadow here at the bottom. You can see the shadow from the sun, so it'll match the lighting of the scene as well. So it's super, super cool. Actually, that's how I got the lighting on this image here. So what I did here is I just downloaded this Adobe stock image here in the background. Those buildings, that's an Adobe stock image. And the lighting that you see on the scene, it's all coming from that image. So I didn't really have to do much besides upload the image, match the perspective, and match the lighting of that image. And then I rotated the image so that it matched my scene a little better. So I can get these nice highlights here on the bottom. And what I mean by that is, now that I have this light here on my scene, I can go into environment and I can make these adjustments to my light here, the intensity and the rotation. So I can make it more intense, or I can rotate it. See how I'm rotating the light now? And the reflection rotates accordingly as well. So you have that capability if you need to. Also, something that I haven't mentioned, but when you're working in Dimension, something that you need to keep in mind is what you're seeing on canvas is not always 100% representative of what the final output will be. So it's a good idea to click on this icon here, this render button, every now and again, so that you can render the scene. And the speed of the render or the pre-render will depend on the speed of your computer and the complexity of your scene. But just click on it, wait a couple minutes, maybe not even that long, maybe just 15-30 seconds, and just make sure that the shadows are looking okay, making sure that things are looking okay, so that you know that you are applying the right settings. So for example, in this case, maybe for whatever reason, maybe if I thought that the shadow opacity was too strong, I could reduce it. I have the pre-render on, so Dimension is going to do the render, and now I can see a less opaque shadow, and it's doing it. You can see how all those little dots start appearing. That's how you can tell that Dimension is rendering. If you want to disable that, just disable it and just work with the preview. But I like working with the render sometimes as I'm editing materials to make sure that they're looking the way that I want them to look in the final output. Cool. Let me see. I guess I could add a reflection. See how I just added a reflection to the ground plane, and it just added a reflection below the bottle. And obviously this wouldn't really happen, right? Just because we're working with concrete. But if I had a reflective surface as my background, this is how I could increase the reflection. And this is a reflection roughness, so it just makes it look rougher, meaning it's not like a mirror image, it's just like a rougher image. And if you forget what each one of these things controls, each of these sliders, you can just hover over it, and Dimension will tell you what it controls. That's probably not a good example because it's cutting off the bottom part in the screen capture there, but in this case you can see just like the little preview. The same thing is true for the different elements in the scene. Let me just hover over a different one, maybe like global intensity, and you can just see what it does in that little preview. Cool. So let me just make sure that I cover that I cover all the basics before we move on into today's text effect. Let me just check the time to see. Oh, we got about an hour. That's great. Let me make sure that I keep the time up because I don't want to go past the hour since we have Voodoo Val coming right up after me. Cool. So what I'm going to do now is actually just talk about 3 things that I didn't talk about before. 2 of those are tools. We have the hand tool and the zoom tool. These control, just like Photoshop, how you're viewing the image in the canvas. It's not actually changing the 3D scene. With the camera tools, we were changing the 3D scene. So if I zoom in, actually that's zooming out. I'll zoom into like 400%. You can see that the image is rendering again. I can select the zoom tool and I'm zooming in, but I'm not really changing the 3D scene. If I were zooming in with the dolly tool, I would zoom in the scene. So I would change my output. With the zoom tool, just like in Photoshop, if I zoom in, you're not really scaling the image. You're just zooming in so you can get a closer look. And the hand tool works just like in Photoshop. You can pan the canvas. And I'm just going to click on this icon and select Fit to Canvas. The other thing, so those are the 2 tools I wanted to talk about. And the third thing I wanted to talk about is this camera bookmark. This is really important. This allows you to create bookmarks on your camera so you can come back to that view. So let's just assume that this is our final view and we're happy with that. I can just click on this plus icon and I'll just call it final view, like so. And I may want to continue working on my project, right? And maybe I need to rotate the camera so that I can see a part of the 3D model to make sure that it works. But now it'll be virtually impossible for me to get back to that exact same point by rotating the camera. So that's what the bookmark is good for. I can now click on this icon and click on Final View, and Dimension will come right back to that bookmark camera view. So it's always very important for you to bookmark a camera. Cool. Super, super cool. I agree, Arian. It looks like a proper photo. Yes, Carol, Dimension has a fantastic rendering engine, so realistic. Being able to adjust it, cool. Yeah, wow, 1-click fix, hours saving Photoshop. Yeah, in Photoshop, to match the perspective, the lighting, and creating the image-based lights, the IBL will take a lot longer. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so I think it's time now to start working with text. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new document, and I'm not going to save this document because we don't need it. So here we are. Here is our empty canvas. And to create text in Dimension, notice that we don't have a type tool. So you can click on this models icon, or just in the general, all asset view, you'll see the text 3D object. And all you need to do is click and drag it and drop it in there. And when you drop it in there, you're going to get generic text. To change the text and the font and all that good stuff, you can just go into the properties panel, scroll down, and under text, you can type in whatever you like. So I can just do D and N for Dimension. And I can select whatever font I like from this list. I can select, for example, Agency or anything else. Let me just stick with Arial. I think Arial will work in this case for what I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to stick with Arial, and I'm going to select Arial Black maybe, just so that I have thick text. And I can also rotate my scene and adjust it accordingly so that it fits like so. Awesome. And basically at this point I can just start building on my text, and there's so many things that we can do with text in Dimension. For example, I can scroll down and notice the properties. We have a lot of properties, so keep that in mind as you're working with Dimension. When you add something, just go into the properties panel and see what's there, because you might be surprised. There might be things in that particular 3D model or that material that are not necessarily found anywhere else. So you might find a good surprise. Excuse me, a good surprise. And in this case, we have the size and depth. So you can control the size of the text if you want from here. You can also scale it like I showed you before with the selection tool. With this tool here, you can also scale it with it if you like, or you can use the size slider here. We also have depth, so I can just make that super, super deep or not. You know, you can adjust the depth accordingly. Pretty cool stuff. But the fun part with text is that you have a bevel option. So if you click on bevel, notice now how my text has bevel, which is super cool. And I can adjust the width, I can adjust the angle, I can adjust anything that I want. And I have different types of bevel. I have the classic bevel, the rounded. I think the rounded might be better for this particular project, but you can just select the one that you prefer, adjust the width and angle and anything else that you want. And if I click on the render button now, you'll notice that not much is going on because I have just like a generic material. I really don't have a background and I don't have much else going on. So why don't we apply more things to this image? And I think that one of the things that we could apply now is maybe use one of the other shapes that we have here in Dimension. Let me just scroll down, and I think maybe this cloth backdrop might be cool. So I'm just gonna add that into the image, into the scene, I should call it. Cool. So I added that backdrop, and let me disable the render, and I'll zoom out. And actually, you know what? I kind of like that view that I was on now. So let me show you a trick. So if that's my view, I can come into the bookmarks and just create my new view. I actually thought I had the last one saved, but I remember that it was a different project. But let me show you a trick anyway. So I'll call this final view. So that's my bookmark, right? So remember, if you move your camera, you can go back into final view, and there it is. But maybe at one point you decide that maybe the view that you selected is not really what you wanted. In this case, the dimension is too high. So I can just bring that down a little bit like so, and I can click on the camera bookmark here, and now when I hover over my final view, instead of clicking on it, I can click on this refresh button, so it will update it to the current view. So next time when I click on final view, it'll come up into that reflected into that view that I just set. Cool. Let me see if that, cool. What I'm gonna do now is just zoom out, and maybe I'm gonna bring the font maybe closer. I'm actually not gonna stick with that final view because I didn't really like how close that the dimension was to the backdrop there. And then maybe actually I don't want to rotate it, I want to scale it rather. So I'm gonna scale it by holding shift and dragging on that, and then just moving the camera around accordingly. I want that backdrop, but I want the DN to be bigger. I want the scale to match a little better. And maybe in this case, I'll move the dimension over this way and bring it closer to us like so. So I think this might be my final view instead. And I'm not 100% happy with it, so I'll rotate it just a tiny little bit. Like so, and right here. So that's gonna be my final view. So now I can just refresh my final view, something like that. Cool. So now it's time to decide what material my text will have. And of course I can click on the materials tab, and from here I can just select whatever material that I like. And let me find something that'll be cool for this. Maybe something that's got some, I thinking of maybe like a metal, something, maybe like a scratch metal. Let's see if this one works. Let me just drag it into Dimension and see what that looks like. Yeah, that one's kind of cool. So this one in particular is really neat because if you scroll down, notice all the different options that we have. We have scratches, splotches, dents, dirt, technical parameters, whatever that is, and miscellaneous. So when you open it up, you can see the scratch density. So you can click and drag it to add more scratches. I don't know if you can see the scratches that are appearing there. Let me change the lighting of the scene. Let me just select one of these studio lights just to brighten everything up. I think that with maybe with this one, the studio key might work. Yeah, that one works great. You might be able to see the scratches that I apply better. So if I go back into my text, remember all your 3D elements live in the scene panel. So I can select the text and I can go back down to what I was showing you. Actually, I need to double click on the text to open up the material and scroll down. And I was showing you the scratches density. So I can add, you see how I'm adding more scratches? See that? A lot of scratches, no scratches at all. So you have total control of how this material looks on that 3D object, which is super, super cool. And I have these, the density of the scratches. So a lot of scratches, not that many. So I'll probably do a little more. And remember, just because something looks like this in the preview doesn't mean that it will look like that in the render. So you might want to click on the render button and do a quick render just to see what that's going to look like with the lighting applied, the shadows applied, the reflections applied, and all that good stuff. So this is going to be a better visual representation of what the final output would look like with the current settings. And I think that looks pretty good. So let's continue. Next, we have splotches here. So let's see. I always like to just crank it all the way up and see what that does. So in this case, I don't know if I like that. Let me just render it and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's definitely not what I want. So maybe in splotch density, to be frank with you, I'm going to keep that at 0. I don't necessarily like it in this case. Dents. How many dents do we have? Do we have a lot of dents or not that many dents? I think that maybe, what do you guys think? Maybe something like 0.5 where we have some dents here in the bevel. I think that looks kind of cool. Let me do the render. So like I said, this is usually how I work. I'll apply a setting and then click on the render button and then see if I like what I see. And in this case, I really like what I see in terms of that dent right above the D on the bevel, like right here. I really, really like that right here. So that's why I like doing this, because I can see what my adjustment applies to the output rather than the preview. So make sure that you keep hitting that render button. How do we know when it's done rendering? It's not necessarily done. It won't finish rendering on here. It'll just give you this preview that is, if you really look at it, is really noisy. So you're not really doing the final render here. If you wanted to render the image completely, you would click on this render tab and then you would select the settings that you want and your output. I usually do a PSD so I can take it into Photoshop. In Photoshop, you'll just get flattened layers and then color correct them if need be. But in this case, just doing the, like the really quick render preview would just give you a good idea of what it would look like. And you can see it's going to be noisy. And that's how you know that it's not really like a final render. It's just like a really quick preview. Cool. So the dents look pretty cool. The size, I like the size of the dents, so I'm not going to change them. Dent shape variation. So that means that we have more variation of the shape of the dent. So in this case, I don't necessarily think it did a better job, so I'm just going to keep it where I had it before. I think that looked pretty cool. And we have dirt as well. So I can just add a little bit of dirt, wait for the render preview, and see what the render preview shows me. And I can kind of see some dirt here. Is that dirt here on the left-hand side? Let me just remove it completely and see if that was dirt. It wasn't dirt. I didn't really see what the dirt did. So I'm just going to go all the way and see what the dirt looks like. It's not really making that big of a change. In this case, I'm just not going to use the dirt. And I did notice what happened in the specular highlights. You can see how it's a little dirty, and I actually like the specular highlights, so I don't want to distract from that. From technical parameters, we have luminosity. So is this going to be brighter or darker? So totally up to you. contrast, hue shift. So maybe this is like actually I went all the way, so it's going to be the same color. But if you, it's kind of like the hue and saturation adjustment layer in Photoshop. You can shift the hue. In this case, I don't want to shift the hue. I could add more saturation, less saturation. Again, in this case, I don't necessarily want to do that. So I'm just going to zero it out. And let me see what I have under miscellaneous. Actually, I do want more saturation. I set it to 0, which was completely desaturated. So maybe 0.5, I think is where I want to keep it. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, cool. Resolution. So if you're working with a texture on a 3D model and the 3D model that you're seeing is something that is either very small or very far back in your scene that doesn't require a lot of detail, then I would use a texture that is fairly small, because that element is going to be so small that you don't need something with a high resolution. But if you're working with a texture that is going to be part of your primary element in your scene and is big and up close and you can see the detail, then you might want to select something with higher resolution so that those details show up better in the scene. And the reason that you don't want to use a large file for everything is because it increases render time, and you don't need those larger file sizes because they're so small in the scene. For something like this, I probably wouldn't go that high. I probably maybe do this one. Again, I don't think this particular scene requires it. Cool. Mona says, looks awesome. Thank you. Cool. So I think that for now, we're just going to work with what we have. And I'm going to move on to working with the background element. So I'm going to select the background element, and I'm just going to move it to the right a little bit, because notice here that I have this little part that's cut off right here. So I'm just going to move it to the right and maybe even move it back a little bit. Actually, no, not back. Maybe I'll scale it sideways. Let me see. Yeah. Scale it on the x-axis and then move it back a tiny little bit, like so. Cool. So that's my backdrop. So now, what color are we going to make our backdrop? Well, instead of making it a particular color, why don't we look at our materials? So I'm going to go into the materials panel here again. Actually, this is a materials panel. And I'm going to scroll down and find a cool material. Let me see what we have here. Let me know if you see something here that you guys like, and we can probably go with that. I'm not going to use this one, but I'm just going to show you different ones just so you can see how cool some of these materials are. So that one creates that mesh effect. And again, the more that you repeat something, the smaller the pattern inside of that material becomes. We have this really cool bronze one that's really reflective. That one looks super, super cool. I don't know. I don't necessarily know if I want to do that one. If I was going to use that one, though, I would make it a lot smaller and just get those little details a lot smaller. Didn't see any blue bar there on the last render. I'm not really rendering anything, Steve. You would see the bar here when I click on the render tab and click on this render button. You'll see the status of that render. I think that's what you're referring to. Cool. Snakeskin. Yikes. Yep. Let me see. We have this lotus. I think I want to go for something that a fabric. So let's see. Maybe even leather. Leather's kind of weird. I don't know. What do you guys think? Leather or fabric? We even have denim, but I don't think denim would work. And remember, you can change the color of these things. So maybe just because the denim is blue doesn't mean I have to keep the blue denim. And actually with denim, you can really see what I was talking about earlier with the repeat and the scale. If this were really denim, that scale is way too large. So I would just make it a lot smaller. So maybe like, I'll even try 10 in this case. Actually, 10 might be too much, but I think that you get the idea. I'll go for like 6 or something. Actually, you know what? Maybe even, yeah, I guess I'm going to be stuck at 5 again. But you can see that when it starts rendering, I'm looking at the details closest to me. I'm just trying to make sure that the scale feels right for what it's supposed to be. And since I really want the denim to like really show up here, I would even try adding like a higher resolution denim texture and see if that works. But yeah, just trying to get my denim to look as realistic as possible here. I'm actually kind of liking the color. I don't know if I want to keep the denim, so let me know in the chat what you guys think. I think Tim said something dark for that sweet, sweet contrast. Need more substance materials in the end. I agree. Actually, it said, cool, Jesus. Oh, it looks like my computer is giving me some issues. That was weird. Actually, just one thing I wanted to mention about that. You reminded me, who reminded me? Carol reminded me about that. So in with Adobe Dimension, you're using, is it called Adobe Standard? I think it's called Adobe Standard Materials. Is that what it's called? Materials. Adobe Standard Material Properties. Yes, that's what they're called. Adobe Standard Material Properties. So if you search for that on Google, you'll go into a helpx page and you can see the properties of all the materials and what they do. And this beautiful, beautiful page right here, you can see all those properties. So you can really, really get in here and read what everything is doing behind the scenes. And you can even open up these, drop downs and really, really get all nerdy and techie about it if you like. But all that information is here. I don't know if Tim or one of the other moderators wants to post this link in the chat, but it's a really, really helpful page where you can really understand the materials. And also, something that I want to mention is these ASM materials are what Photoshop is using now inside of Photoshop 3D. So if you're following any old tutorials, for example, if you follow my tutorials and you watch any of the tutorials that were made for Photoshop 3D before Photoshop 2020, you're going to notice that some of the sliders are different. That's because Adobe changed the old materials inside of Photoshop to more closely resemble the materials inside of Dimension, which is why some of those sliders are going to be different. So these properties will also apply to Photoshop if they're available in the Photoshop 3D panel. For example, the metallic control is basically what the old reflection control was inside of Photoshop. So this is also, a lot of these things are also applicable to Photoshop 3D if that's something that you're into. But yeah, Adobe Standard Material Properties, just search for that on Google and it should bring you to this page from Adobe on the helpx website, and you can see all the information about all the material properties. And again, like I mentioned before, some materials have their own properties, like we were working with the scratches and the dents on that material. Those are specific to this material. Not all materials have those properties. Why don't we take a look at the denim and see what the denim has? So we can see that the denim has roughness, white line intensity. Let's increase that and see what happens. Let me just click on the render button and maybe we can see the effect. Like I said, sometimes you don't see the effect unless you render the image. I think what that is are these white lines that you see here. So white line intensity, white line amount. Let me add more and see if we can see more. I'll just bump these all the way up and then see if we see like a crazy effect. Yeah, we definitely do. You can see how much these lines increase in size. So like I said, most materials have properties that you can come in there and adjust. For sure, you'll be able to adjust color. So for example, if I wanted a different shade of blue for my denim, I can do that. I can make it a different color. It doesn't have to be blue. I can make it red if I wanted to. So you have all those different options. I think earlier Tim was talking about making a dark background. So maybe, let's see, Tim, what can we do here, Tim? What can we do here? Maybe this one to create that contrast. I do like, I want something with a pattern. Let me see what this plastic one does. This one's kind of cool. What do you guys think? Actually, this one might be cool because I could show you some another cool thing. So we have this, this one has really cool properties. I actually haven't used this one. I'm just looking at it now. It says emboss color and the back color. And you can select the different colors here, which is cool. It has a tile number, so let me increase that, and then we have more tiles. That's super cool. Plastic grain intensity, emboss roughness, super cool. Oh, you can actually make some of these metallic so that they're catch a little bit of light and reflection. That's also really cool. I like that. So maybe we can make like the emboss metallic, but leave the back at 0, which wouldn't be metallic at all. I like that. And maybe add a little bit of contrast here. Super cool. And just for fun, we'll just make the resolution higher on that. And that's creating this really, really cool effect. And something else that we should add, let me see. Let me increase the tile. Actually, no, I'll increase the repeat to maybe 2. Just make those smaller. Maybe 3. I'm going to go smaller. Yeah, 3 are probably good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a camera effect to this so that we can get a blurry background. And the way that you would do that is by going into the scene here, into my scene, and select camera, and then I can just enable the focus. And basically what you want to do is click the focus point. So I can click on my text because I want that to be in focus, and notice that I can start blurring. Let me disable this, and I think you'll be able better see what's going on. See that if I leave this at 0, nothing is blurry. But as I drag the slider to the right, I can really create like a really shallow depth of field. And the only thing in focus will be the thing that I clicked on, which is the text. But that might be way too much blur. So in this case, maybe blur it just a little bit, maybe something like that. And I can click on the render button and just wait a second. It's going to take a little longer now because we're applying a blur, just so that we can see the effect that that creates. What processor do you have and how much RAM? To be frank with you, I switch laptops all the time. So I think the last time I was on doing a 2-hour stream, I had a different laptop. This is literally the second time I'm using this laptop, so I don't even know what the processing power is. But I guess if you're interested, Alberto, I could tell you. This is actually the latest MSI. I was using the older MSI Prestige 15 last time I was on. Now I'm using the newer one. So if you go into MSI Prestige 15 and just look for their higher end series, and that's the one that's exactly the one that I'm using, I think. Yeah, the 10th gen. Yeah, this is what I'm using here. So if you're interested on the specs of the computer that I'm using, you can check that out here. This is exactly the laptop that I'm using right here. And one of the reasons that I like it is because it represents Adobe RGB at 100%, which is super cool. But yeah. So if you're interested, Alberto, this is what I'm using, Prestige 15th 10th generation laptop. But yeah, cool. Anyway, so it looks like the pre-render is done, and you can see how the bottom part of the photo here is blurry, and then the area that's right under the text, because I click on this part in 3D space, so that area is in focus. So you can create some really cool 3D shallow depth of field effects, because this acts now like a camera. So I recommend that you go in there and you go and just start adjusting the camera. And in some cases, like I know I did almost like I'll be frank, almost like a boring scene where I'm just like looking at the DN just because I wanted to keep things clear and simple. But if I really wanted to get more creative, maybe I can do like an extreme angle. You know, let me zoom in here and do something semi-cool. We'll see. Let me zoom out. Just find like a really cool angle or something. Maybe something like this. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm just trying to get like an extreme angle. And the word's probably too small. It'll probably be better with like a longer word. But anyway, I'm just trying to get like a really like cool angle here. And I know I'm going to have to move the background, but what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to really try to focus like maybe like on the corner here. So set my focus here. This is going to be cool. Let me now select the background, and the background I'll just move over to the right. And I think, no, actually, no, I'm going to have to rotate it. All right, so I'll rotate the background. There we go. So basically what I'm doing here is now waiting for this to render, but you'll notice how like my 3D object will be in focus here and not a focus there. And this is not the original intention I had with the properties and settings that I added, so I would have to adjust them accordingly. So I probably would have to go in here and just adjust the blur amount a little bit so that maybe just the N is blurry, and most of the D is in focus. But again, you get the idea. And this is probably too fat now. In this angle, I think that looks a little too fat. So I will come back into text, and I would adjust my depth and just not make it as fat. Maybe something like that. You know, this is all subjective, of course, and you can just play around with the settings. Here's a cool trick that I think, I'm going to save this view, by the way, since this is what I'm working now. So I'm going to save this view, and I'm just going to call it second final, because it's a second final. It's kind of like when you're naming PSDs, final 1, final 2, final 7, final 5. But anyway, so here's a cool trick for you guys. If you want to get creative with your lights, like to create like some cool highlights in the image, you can just go into the basic shapes, add a sphere into your 3D scene, and change the material to glowing, and that glows and emits light. See that? And what I can do now is I can move it around in 3D space. Let me see. And what I'll do is I'll zoom out, and I'm using the mouse wheel to zoom out, by the way. And I can just place it like, you know, like maybe right here. No, not there. Not there. Trying to get right on that. There we go. Right here. And then when I come back into my final view, if I'm not blocking myself, yep, I'm right on it. Nope, I'm right. I gotta get away from it. Let me go into this view, zoom out, and what happened to my sphere? There it is. So maybe I can just move it up and away even further. But the point is that now that light is going to emit and hit my DN text, and I can create some really, really cool highlights that I otherwise wouldn't have. So this is a way of fine-tuning the image, and I actually did that technique on the project that I showed you earlier. On this one, so even though this was a great highlight and it created this beautiful, beautiful light coming through the window, I still needed more light. Let me see if I can find it. You might be able to see it here maybe. I still needed more light in the back of the room. So like right here. So the light that's here on this side, you can actually tell. This is like one of those mistakes that I made that I didn't realize till later, is I added one of those spheres to kind of light the back of the room. That's why the shadow on this plant is facing the other way, because the light's coming from the window going in, but the shadow doesn't really reflect that. And notice the difference in shadow. This is much softer and this is much sharper. It's because I use that technique, and I wanted to have highlights in other areas that reflected nice, but then I realized later on that the shadow didn't quite match the scene. But you know, I'm sure that probably most people didn't notice, but that's what I used. And I saw that Carol posted in the chat, Alex Lazarus, who I'm not familiar with, also uses a glowing plane for light. Yep, you can definitely use a glowing plane for light. At basically the same idea. You can try both and see which one works better for you. So what Carol is suggesting is to use a plane. So you can just come in here in the models, drag a plane in here, and you know, I can just add a material to that, a glowing light. There it is. So now I have this material emitting light, and you know, I can just place that accordingly, maybe even rotate it, something like that. And let me make sure that I added the material just to make sure that the light hits it. And let me go into my final view, and there it is. So that's the whole idea behind the glowing effect. And also you can change the color of the light. So if you click on your 3D material here for that plane or the sphere, whatever you're using, you can change the color of the light, and you can see now I'm getting some red highlights there. Or maybe I can make this one like yellow and like really enhance the highlights that are already in that scene. Maybe get it closer if it's not working the way that you want. So totally up to you how you affect the image. So this one I can probably just increase the glow dramatically, and you can see now how I'm getting more of those lights in there. Maybe get closer but anyway, so that was something that I wanted to show you guys that you could do. You can add these really cool highlights with planes or spheres like So awesome. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. Cool. Oh yeah, thank you for sharing the link, Tim, for the Substance 3D materials. Awesome. Thanks for that. Cool. I'm just making sure that there are no more questions. Awesome. So let me just go. I'm just gonna hit undo a couple of times, and I think I'll be able to get back to where I was. I'm not sure if I'm liking this extreme angle, but I am trying to get back to where I was in. You know what? I would totally look silly if this had a history panel. Nope, I don't see a history panel. As far as I know, it doesn't have a history panel. Like in Photoshop, where I could just go back to like a particular step. What I'll do, I'm just gonna go to the final view that I had before, and I'm just gonna rotate I think this is probably the fastest way of doing it. Just select the cloth backdrop and rotate it, just to have it more or less where I had it before. Yeah, that should be good. Cool. So I'm not sure if I'm liking this backdrop, but maybe something with this color might be kind of cool. And we'll see what the render looks like. I'm actually kind of feeling that vibe of teal orange. I think you guys know that I really like that color combination. Maybe this is a little too bright. So notice how here I have this image as my texture. I can just come in here and change the color, and obviously it's not gonna work because oh yeah, it did work. Because I switched from image to color. You don't have to remove it. For a second there I thought you had to remove it. But now I can come in here and I can select like a darker teal effect, like so. And I think that I still would want to have my focus enabled, so I can enable the focus, make sure that make sure that the focus is set on the text, and I can blur it like so, and then I can continue rendering. So I think I'm going to go for something like that, where the teal greenish color contrasts with the Dimension logo. Let me know what you guys think about that. Mondays are difficult. Why are they difficult, Noor? If you add little robots or monkeys with lights on their heads too, that could help. Yeah, that definitely could help. Something else that I would recommend when you're working with something like this, just because you're working with text, it doesn't mean that you can't work with other shapes. So you can start bringing in some of these 3D models, and tomorrow we're going to work more with compositing in 3D, where I'm going to just bring a whole bunch of different 3D models in here. And but anyway, the point that I was trying to make is that you can start bringing in other elements, like a sphere, and then maybe for this sphere, just to make it look cool, I could just add like a metal material to it so that it reflects the things around it, and I can also scale it down like so. And here's a cool keyboard shortcut. If you hold, let me stop the rendering now so it doesn't render every time I do something. If you hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click and drag on the Move tool, you can duplicate the 3D object. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate these little marbles and put them like all over my scene here, just so that they reflect different parts. And obviously this is all subjective. So I'm just creating this cool little scene with marbles and the 3D text. And let me see, what else can we add? Maybe I'll add a torus. Why not? That's way too big. So I'll scale that down. I have a nice little torus in here. And I can apply a different material. Let's do something weird here. Let's go with, everything's so reflective. So maybe we can do something that's not that reflective. So maybe, why don't we do the leather one? Leather might be kind of cool. And then I can do a render, and I can see how those elements look in my 3D scene. So it's simple as that. It's just drag and drop, and just adjust the properties. So it's quite simple to do. You don't have to know much 3D to get an effect like this. The one thing, and we have about 15 minutes, actually less than that, we have about 10 minutes. So the one thing I want to show you now is how to do something a little different in terms of how the text reacts to the ground plane that it's sitting on. So right now we had basically like a backdrop. I could have used an image. We're gonna work more with 3D and images tomorrow, but I'm gonna show you now is how to do something with a plane. But actually, you know what? It's the depth of field is not working and it's bothering me, so I'm gonna change it a little bit. So I'm just gonna bring down the blur amount just a little bit and then let it render again, and I think I'll be happier with it because I wanted this marble to be blurry, this torus to be kind of blurry, but this one here I wanted it to be more in focus. But anyway, so this is the effect that I've created. As you can see, it looks fairly realistic with not too much work. All you have to do is keep fine-tuning those controls so that you get the effect that you want. Oh, stone. Okay, somebody said stone, so let me see. Stone. We'll make, I really like that one. We'll make the torus stone. I think that'll work with stone. So we have trying to find something. Let's see. We'll do cement. See how that works on this torus. There you go. So that one definitely doesn't have any reflection. But yeah, so this is the effect that I'm going to go with. Since we have 9 minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into my 3D scene, and from my 3D scene, as much as I like them, I'm going to select my spheres, and I'm just going to delete my spheres. Whoops, I actually deleted my text. I didn't want to do that. Let me undo that and delete my torus, and also delete the cloth backdrop. And what I'm going to do now is select my dimension text here, and I'm going to go into the rotation, and you can click and drag on these labels to rotate them, much like you can in Photoshop, and you can do all kinds of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate it so it sits flat on the ground like so. So basically I can just keep rotating it, and if I go into 90 degrees, it should be flat on the ground. There it is. But remember, we're talking about the ground plane, so it's cutting it. So I can just click on this icon and it moves it there. And what I can do now is just rotate my camera like so, and there it is. And the reason that I'm doing that is because now I can use a plane as my background. So I can just drag a plane in here, and I could also rotate it 90 degrees, and oops, actually I said 180. How many degrees are we doing here? Yeah, there we go, 180. I can select that with the move tool and then hold shift, click and drag, and oops, sorry about that, wrong icon. Let me select the cube, click and drag, and then just make that so that it covers the canvas. And now that plane could be the background that holds the 3D object, and you can apply whatever material you want to it. So I can do like a metal material, which probably wouldn't be that great in this case. I can do all kinds of different things just like I could before. Let me change the repeat to maybe 6 in this case. And as you can see, we're creating some really, really cool text effects. And maybe I can move it up a little bit. And maybe I don't want to look at this straight up. Maybe just have a little bit of an angle like so. And also do more depth. Oh, you know what? One of the issues is that, let me make sure that my ground plane is, there we go. My 3D text is now like protruding out, and that's what I wanted, something like that. So we have like really, really tall 3D text. See that? Maybe that might be too tall. Maybe a little less tall. Maybe like that. And I just want to make sure that everything is on the ground plane. And in this case, since the 3D text keeps going down, I don't necessarily need to keep it on the ground plane because, see that? Let me just select the plane here. It looks like I have 2 planes. I'm not sure why. Oh, I had another plane for the light, I think. I'll delete the second one. I'll select this one and make sure that that one is in the ground plane. There you go. That was the issue. And now you can see this cool effect. So maybe you can do something like this is like on a wall or a desk or something, and you can just adjust it accordingly. And I'm just gonna move it over and maybe zoom in and move it over some more. And then you can always use these rotation sliders. If you want to rotate the camera, you can also have those properties. So select the camera, and then you can make these rotations like so. And you could also use the position to move it around with more precision. And I'm going to click on the render button, and you can create like really cool like graphic design 3D text right away, just using the same techniques. The problem right now is that I have the focus enabled. If I disable the focus and apply the render, you'll see the output the way that it should without being so blurry. Cool. Let me see if we have any question in the chat. So I think that Tim in the chat is saying that you can click and hold under render preview, and I have the resolution set to full, but you can change it to a different setting. And the reason that you want to do that is so that you render something faster. Thank you for that tip, Tim. It's in the chat. Thank you so much. Cool. So we just have a couple more minutes. Let me see if there's any more questions. Oh, hey, Lisa, how's it going? My good friend Lisa Carney is in the chat. Good to see you, Lisa. Good morning. You should check her out. Lisa Carney and I, actually, you should check out our stream here at Adobe Live. Lisa and I did a stream, I want to say like 2-3 months ago, and we were learning about how she creates a lot of her movie posters. Lisa is a professional finisher, and she works on some amazing, amazing projects. Every time I say your job title, Lisa, I feel like you're like an MMA fighter, like a professional finisher. I'm expecting you to do like a move on somebody. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, we have 2.5 more minutes. So let me just quickly do the housekeeping items before I say goodbye. The most important thing is the schedule for the day. So we started the day with me at 7:30 a.m. getting started in Adobe Dimension. We work with 3D text. I'll be back again tomorrow where I'm going to do 3D compositing with photos and 3D objects. So I'm not going to focus so much on the stuff that I covered today. I'm just going to assume that people watched it, and we're going to do a lot more compositing and work like that with 3D and photos. That'll be tomorrow. But right after me, just in a couple minutes, we're going to have Voodoo Val doing the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. Voodoo Val is always awesome. Make sure that you check her out. At 9:30, we're going to do vector art with Lacey. Then we have Julia Masalska at 11:30 a.m. Pacific doing the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge. After that, at noon, we have the Adobe XD sharing and collaboration with Kate. And at 2 p.m. Pacific, we have the XD Daily Creative Challenge with Peter and the Design in the Dark stream with Doc Reed and Andrew at 2:30, and that'll be the day. So make sure that you stick around into the very end. Thank you so much, Carol, Sean. Lisa saying, haha, I should be a wrestler. Yeah, you should. What would be your wrestler name, Lisa? The finisher? But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Also, one thing before I go, don't forget to, let me switch over to my screen. Don't forget to check out my Behance page, Behance. So behance.net/JR from PTC. And actually, these are the, now that Lisa's in the chat, this is the project that Lisa and I worked on together. So this is Lisa's project here. And, oh, I guess I didn't put mine up, or is this the one you tagged me in, Lisa? I'm not sure anymore. Well, this is the one that Lisa worked on. Oh, mine's right here. This is mine. I don't know why they're not in the same page, but it doesn't matter. Here I am. I did a cat, and then Lisa did another cat over here. So make sure that you check out those streams. Again, you can find them here on my Behance page. But what I wanted to show you on my Behance page was my contemporary living space 3D scene done in Adobe Dimension. If you just want to see that and check it out, come in here, check out all the different graphics. Also, I think I asked it earlier, but I don't think anybody, like, no one answered the question. Like, who do you got? Like, what Easter eggs do you see in here? One that I'll point out really quick since I don't have much time. Claudia from Print My Soul, that's her logo right there. And also here on the left-hand side, Claudia from Print My Soul's illustration from her book. This is one of my composites. So yeah, a whole bunch of stuff here. A drawing from my friend Mark Heaps. Eminem is my favorite music artist, so this is one of his CDs, Marshall Mathers LP. A camera, because I like photography. My first Adobe Max speaker badge. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. But anyway, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. It was awesome being here with you today. I hope that you enjoyed Adobe Dimension, and I hope that you're back again with me tomorrow, where we're gonna do more Adobe Dimension and more compositing in 3D. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow. See you. Bye.